Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Transformative Learning Week. We're going to talk about micro internships today. My name is Jeanette Hickle, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Internships and Experiential Learning. Essentially, what that means is that it's my responsibility to bring more internships and experiential opportunities to you as VCU students. And so one of the things that I've brought to you is to learn a little bit more about micro internships and the platform that we leverage to help bring them to you, micro internships. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Danielle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Rueger Miroewski. I'm the Associate Director of Partnerships at Parker Dewey and very excited to have this time to talk to you today about micro internships. I will be keeping an eye on the chat, and I know Jeanette's going to help me too. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put those in there. But want to start by first acknowledging that, especially as you're reflecting on everything that you're getting from this transformative week, some of the challenges that you may be facing as you're trying to build experience. And what you see on the screen are just a few challenges we've heard from students who eventually ended up using the Parker Dewey platform, but what they were struggling with before they found micro internships. So whether you resonate with, I'm looking at opportunities and I'm only seeing unpaid and I can't afford to do that, or I don't know what I want to do. So I don't know that I want to commit an entire semester to an internship without having a chance to try it out. Maybe you're trying to make a pivot. You've gotten to a certain point in your degree program and you realized, oh, I don't know if this major is for me, but I need to graduate on time. I need to find a way to get experience that maybe isn't directly related to my major and do it quickly. Maybe you're just trying to get that first experience. Whatever your challenges are, the good news is that micro internships can help. They can definitely help with all of the issues on this screen, and they can likely help with yours as well. So what are these magical micro internships that I'm saying can do all these things? In short, they are short-term paid professional projects that you do with real companies. They're typically remote. When we say short-term, we mean it. They're focused on a specific deliverable or set of deliverables. So a company may say, I need someone to create an email marketing campaign, or maybe they need someone to do research on a topic and create a little report of the findings. Maybe they need someone to go through data. Maybe they need someone to code something. We see these projects from all different types of industries and all different sizes of companies, but they're all focused on some specific deliverable. And typically they take somewhere between 10 and 40 hours total. That's not per week, that is in total. So even for those of you with the busiest schedules, this can be a great way to fit in some real experience. Because these are real projects, every single micro internship is also paid. So for those of you who can't afford to spend your time on something unless it's compensated, this is a way to make sure that you're compensated for the time you're spending on real projects. We also require that the projects posted are professional. So we're making sure companies know these need to use some level of skills that y'all are learning in your degree programs. Even if it's in your first or second year, a number of companies use this as a way to engage those of you who may not be ready for a traditional internship yet, but can still do some of these short-term projects early on. And as mentioned, we see these from all different types of industries, all different sizes of companies. And something to keep in mind about these is they are on demand. So what that means is instead of traditional internships where companies are posting and thinking, okay, here's for the fall, here's for the spring, here's for the summer, with micro internships at any time, today, tomorrow, the next day, it could go on in perpetuity. If a company realizes that they have a need, they can post that project. And most projects are only posted for about a week or less before they make a selection. So what that means is when you log on to the Parker Dewey platform, there are always going to be opportunities there, but it's not like a lot of other platforms where you're going to see a ton all focused on a specific timeline. You're going to see projects that are going to make decisions within the next few days. They're going to disappear. New ones are going to come in. So it's not an overwhelming number at any given time, and you're encouraged to log in regularly. For example, if you're only logging in once every month, there are a lot of projects that will cycle through in the interim that you won't see. So hopefully when I was describing what these are, the benefits were clear, but one is accessibility. Most of these are remote. You can do them from anywhere you have a Wi-Fi connection. They're real experience with real companies that you're able to put on your resume or your portfolio. Regardless of what company you're working with, however, you'll add it to your resume as an independent contractor of Parker Dewey. We are the platform that hosts all these micro internship experiences. So whether you're working with a Fortune 500 company or a local mom and pop shop, you are going to list the experience as independent contractor of Parker Dewey. Depending on the industry and if the company gives you permission, you may even be able to add this to your portfolio. We also find that flexibility is key for students with busy schedules. Because these are project-based, how it works is once you're selected, you'll connect with a real professional at the company hosting the project. You'll get to ask questions, make sure you have the resources and the context to work on the project. And depending on the complexity, there might be more check-ins along the way, or there might just be email check-ins, or you might just be ready to go and work on it. But the bulk of the work gets done when it fits in your schedule, as long as you're hitting the deadline. So for those of you with really busy schedules, if when you do your best work and when you have time is 3 a.m., that is okay with micro internships. Again, you're connecting with a real professional, so expanding your network. This is a really efficient way for those of you who aren't sure what you want to do to try out different fields and companies. And a number of companies are using micro internships very intentionally as a way to build a pipeline or maybe even audition for longer term roles. So while it's not guaranteed, if you do a great job on your micro internship, there might be a traditional internship or maybe a full-time job offer on the other side. And I know I already highlighted, but sharing again because we know it's important, you get paid when you complete these experiences. So who can do a micro internship? Is it worth you hanging out for the rest of the call? As long as you are at least 18 or older, this is also open to students or recent graduates. So if you're getting ready to graduate soon, maybe this December, you can still use this if you're trying to figure out what that next step in your career is, even after graduation. We have had international students do micro internships, but check with International Student Services at your institution. They know where you are in your academic program. They know all the requirements if you're thinking of using CPT for registering for credit. So check with them first to make sure you are eligible. And undocumented students can do this as well, as long as you have a valid ITIN, because all micro interns are independent contractors of Parker Dewey, which is what makes this accessible to that population. So hopefully at this point you're thinking, all right, I could use some experience, I could use some money, and I could use it in a way that fits with my schedule. How do I get started? We're going to walk you through step by step. But before we jump in, just a reminder about Parker Dewey's role in all of this. Regardless of what company you're working with, we are the employer of record. We're the ones making sure that the projects are appropriate, that they're compensated. And if you run into any trouble with your micro internship, whether you're having trouble getting in touch with your supervisor, or maybe your schedule has changed and you're no longer able to complete if you've been selected for a project, we're the folks you reach out to. We're also the folks, if you're selected, that are going to be paying you. So if you get selected for a micro internship and you have questions about pay, the timeline, the pay forms, any of that, we are the people who will help you. So Jeanette is already ahead of me. If you haven't already, this is a great time to go to that link that she has already put in the chat. It's going to bring you to a page that looks like this. If you do not already have an account, this is a great time to create one so you can apply the tips we're going to talk about live. If you already have an account, this is a great time to log into that account again so you can apply the tips that we are going to talk about live. So if you're creating your account for the first time, some of these pieces I'm going to talk about, you're going to get introduced to in a slightly different order. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my existing student account, and I'm going to walk you through those pieces that are required. Then what we're going to do is we're going to backtrack, and we're going to talk about those things that you can put in your profile that aren't required, but are going to very much increase your likelihood of being selected for one of these paid professional experiences. So as far as those required pieces, you're going to put in the basic stuff, your name and email address. Please make sure it's one you check regularly. For those just joining, micro internships are on demand for companies, which means most are making selections within a week or less of posting. And when they do that, they typically expect a response from the selected micro intern within 24 hours of being selected. Now, that's not saying you complete the project within 24 hours. That's just responding to say, yes, I'm excited to do this. Let's set up a time to meet. So please, please, please make sure whatever email address you're using, you check it regularly. There are a few things more heartbreaking to us on the Parker Dewey team than someone who's gotten selected and then they didn't see the email letting them know. Something else that is required is your current address and permanent address. And to be clear, when we say address, We're just looking for your city and state. And you may be thinking, well, didn't this lady just say these are remote? Why do you care so much about my location? As mentioned, a number of companies are using these intentionally as a way to build a pipeline for longer term opportunities. So even though the project is probably remote, they may be interested in engaging someone, if you do a great job, that then could do an in-person internship or might be in the area for winter break or summer break and could do an in-person experience then. It's not relevant for every single project, but it's relevant for enough. That's why we require that information. You'll also be required to put in your work authorization, so make sure you add that there. And the next required section is your education section. So this is where you're going to want to make sure you put in Virginia Commonwealth University. If you have already gotten an associate's degree, or maybe you are getting your master's, whatever level of education you have already completed, make sure that you add those as additional education institutions. Whatever institution you are currently attending, that's the one that you're going to want to make primary. So if you add others, you'll see that option appear. Whatever's at the top is listed as your primary. Please make sure you are only adding educational institutions that you have either already graduated from or are currently attending. If you just took a couple of summer courses 3 years ago, you didn't graduate with a certificate or anything like that, those do not get included, just those you have graduated from or again are currently enrolled in. And the reason you'll want to add all that apply is because companies do have the ability to feature projects to specific schools. So you may at some point see opportunities exclusively for Virginia Commonwealth University. And at other points, if you've attended other institutions, you may specifically see opportunities only available to students and recent graduates from those institutions, which is why it benefits you to add all. The next required section is going to be the demographics section. And I want to make it clear, this is not made visible to employers. This is not part of your profile that they see. This is only for the Parker Dewey team on the back end. Because one of our goals is to make sure these experiences are accessible and equitable. So this information allows us to know how well we're doing that. Not something companies see, but even if you still just don't want to disclose, there's an option for each of these questions to do so. Right. So at this point, we have gone over the basics, the required pieces that will then allow you to start looking at opportunities. But to be transparent, if you start applying for opportunities with just those pieces filled in, the chances of being selected are pretty low. So we're going to backtrack now and we're going to talk about those pieces that aren't required, but are going to make it more likely that you be selected. So starting with the profile section, the first recommended piece is adding that professional photo. Now, you may have heard folks say you never want to add a photo to your resume, and those folks are your friends. That is great advice. But we encourage you to think about your Parker Dewey profile more like a LinkedIn profile than a resume. And in that case, it is appropriate to add a photo, head and shoulders, just make sure the lighting is decent, doesn't need to be anything fancy. If for some reason you're uncomfortable having your photo on your profile, please make note that the only folks who see it will be the companies with which you have applied. It's not publicly visible. If you're still uncomfortable, you could perhaps put a VCU logo. You could put some sort of logo that indicates the type of industry or projects you're interested in, just something to show that you've taken the time to personalize it. The next piece here is going to be a personal statement. Now, some of you may have heard about personal statements in the context of like applying for graduate school and those types of things. And those are essays and not what we're looking for with a personal statement on Parker Dewey. In fact, you are limited to just 255 characters when it comes to a personal statement here. So this is supposed to be succinct. It's supposed to be short. If you're going, well, I don't really know what to put in there, you have a resource here from the page that was put in the chat. And these are professional communication tips for micro interns. So whenever you hit a section, either in your profile, on your application, and you're going, I don't know, I could use some guidance, there's a good chance that there's guidance that's going to apply in these professional communication tips. So I'm going to put that link in the chat right now. Professional communication tips. All right, it is in there. And we're going to start with this preparing to apply. And this gives you some support when you're putting in that personal statement. Now, you do not have to follow this formula, but it's a nice place to start if you're just not sure where to begin. So the first thing you may want to do is highlight 1 or 2 adjectives that are both true to you and relevant to the types of projects you want to apply for. So for example, if you're someone who's interested in social media projects, you really want to get experience like that on your resume from a Parker Dewey micro internship, and you're a genuinely organized person, that might be a good adjective to highlight, because folks working with social media often have to manage a lot of dates, they have to manage a lot of assets. So being organized is a real benefit. The next thing you may want to do is highlight a couple of skills or strengths. So again, this is going to vary depending on what types of projects you're interested in. To give some examples, if you're interested in coding projects and you know a few coding languages, this might be a good place to list them. If you are interested in data analysis, maybe you just got a data analysis certificate, highlight that certificate. Same with things like Google Ads certificates or other kind of HubSpot certifications, those types of things that aren't going to fit in your education section, but could be great to highlight here. And then the third piece, what is your goal on Parker Dewey? What are you hoping to accomplish? So here we see some examples of that formula in action. This person, for their adjectives, highlighted that they were ambitious and tech savvy. For their skills, they highlighted their writing skills. And depending on where you are in your educational experience, you could have pretty broad goals or you could have pretty specific ones. This person was just seeking opportunities to begin building that real-world experience. This next person said, I'm an analytical, organized, and proactive. So they had some nice adjectives there. Economics major, they highlighted their certificate in data analytics. So you can see they're probably interested in data projects. So highlighting that they're analytical, organized, and proactive, those are adjectives that, as long as they're genuinely true to them, go hand in hand with the types of projects they're interested in. And they were looking to build awareness of potential career paths. This person highlighted that they're hardworking, that they have research skills and experience developing, implementing marketing strategies. They had a slightly more specific goal that they wanted to apply their skills in a mission-driven organization. So you can see how this same formula can be applied in a number of different ways, but ultimately the goal is to help the companies understand a little bit more about you and what you're looking for. Another piece that you want to take advantage of is this affiliation section. Now, there are 3 affiliations that you can add in here. There are some others if you find out about Parker Dewey through a specific organization that might apply, but the 3 that are most often relevant are either veteran, student athlete, or honor student. Now, with honor student, we're not saying you're on the honor roll, although kudos to you. That is awesome. Congratulations if that applies. But we're talking about, are you part of your institution's honors program? So if any of these apply to you, if you are, for example, a student athlete, you will want to make sure that you add that to the affiliation section, because just like companies can feature projects to specific schools, companies also have the ability to feature projects to these specific affiliations. So if you're a student athlete, a veteran, or a part of your school's honors program, you might see additional opportunities as long as you add it to your affiliation section. So the next recommended but not required section is this experience section. And you may be thinking, well, hey, I see we're going to get to resume next. Why do I need to add an experience section as well as a resume? Don't they accomplish the same thing? And I hear you, but there is logic behind why we have both. And we're going to go to this preview section to give you an idea. While it's not an exact match, this shows you pretty close to what companies see when they view your profile. And as you can see here, they see this experience section, but to look in your resume, they have to do an additional click, and then it will open up in a new tab. So what I encourage y'all to do is think of this experience section as a teaser. This is not where you put every experience you've ever had, but where you put 1 to 3 experiences that are most relevant to the types of projects you would like to engage in on Parker Dewey. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, I don't have any yet. That's what I was hoping Parker Dewey was going to come in for. And that is totally fair. Micro internships can be a great way to get that first professional experience. But even if you haven't had a paid professional experience yet, just as a VCU student, I am sure that you have some experiences that could apply. So in this section, you could put, as you see in these examples, you could put class experiences, you could put extracurricular experiences, you could put volunteer experiences. Even if it's just assignments that have highlighted great writing skills, if those are the types of things you're interested in, you can add specific projects from your academics to highlight those skills. So that is the experience section. Then we're going to move on to this resume section. Now, this is one of the biggest determinants in whether students get selected for micro internships. we have seen a very strong preference amongst companies for candidates that have a resume. Even if there's not a lot on it yet, they really appreciate y'all taking the time to create this professional document that they can easily scan. So if you want to get selected for a micro internship, make sure you have that resume uploaded. Even better, make sure you have it reviewed by your career center to know that it is in good shape. You also have the opportunity here, if you do have a portfolio, if you're in coding, maybe you have a GitHub, and if you're in graphic design, maybe you have a portfolio site. Anything like that that shows examples of your work, you're encouraged to add that here as well. And the other thing you're encouraged to add on this page is a link to your LinkedIn profile. If you do not already have a LinkedIn profile, we highly recommend creating one. It's just a good practice to have for those who aren't familiar. It's a site that allows you to connect with other professionals. There's no cost to having a LinkedIn account. And I have literally sat with a company who was making selections, said, there's 2 candidates, everything else is equal. I'm going to choose the one that has a LinkedIn link because it's just one step towards being a professional, and I appreciate that they've taken it. So not only could it potentially help you get selected, but if and when you are selected for a micro internship, it's going to make it easier for you to connect with that supervisor at the company, to stay in touch, to request a recommendation. So really a recommended practice, not only to have that LinkedIn account, but then to make sure you link it to your Parker Dewey profile. The next section here is the document section, and not everyone takes advantage of this section. So for example, on this resume page, if you already have a portfolio that does a great job of highlighting your work, you may not find it necessary to use this section. If you're a little bit earlier on in your educational career, let's use graphic design as an example again, you may have some examples of work you've done for class or work maybe you've already done for clients, but you may not have a portfolio site yet. So this is your opportunity to upload examples of work you've done that is relevant to the types of projects that you're interested in. So if you have flyers you've designed, if you're in graphic design, or if you have code that you've created, if you're applying for coding projects, if you're interested in PR projects and you have examples of press releases that you've written, if you are interested in writing projects and you want to upload a writing sample, those are all great examples of documents that you could upload to support. This is why you should select me for your micro internship. Now, a quick thing to keep a note about anything that you upload here is whatever the file name is, that is what is going to show up on your preview. So you can see if I were applying for micro internships, I would want to change this because this is kind of long and hard to read. I would maybe want to call this example annual report. So if you are uploading an assignment and you put in final exam for class XYZ, that's what they're going to see here. So make sure you rename the file to make it clear what it actually is, so the company is inclined to click on it. So just to recap, folks, those recommendations to make sure that your profile is in good shape, make sure that you add a photo, you add a personal statement, that you add highlighted experience, even if it's just classroom experience, upload that resume for sure, add a LinkedIn link, and either add a link to a portfolio or some other website with examples of your work, or maybe upload a few examples of that work if you don't have a portfolio or other type of website yet. And with that, we have covered the setting up of the profile, and that gets attached to every micro internship you apply for. So you only have to do this once. You can update it at any time, but setting this up well is really crucial to your potential success on Parker Dewey. Once you have set up this profile, now's the time where we get to do the fun part. We get to hop over to the dashboard and we get to start looking at opportunities. Now you'll notice we do not have a lot in the way of filters on Parker Dewey. And I know it may seem like an oversight, for example, that we don't have a filter for major, but I promise you it's very intentional. We have seen graduating seniors and recent graduates actually end up getting full-time job offers as a result of micro internships that would have never popped up if they had been able to filter for their major. So that's why we encourage you to scroll through, to look at the different opportunities, to see what might be a good fit. Now, as mentioned before, there are always opportunities, but as you can see, we've scrolled to the bottom. And that's because these cycle so quickly. You can see from these start dates, most of these are going to make a selection within the next couple of days. Every once in a while, you'll get one that gives a little bit more notice. Often those ones that give more notice are going to be the rare on-site ones. You also see majority are typically remote. We have a little bit more than usual that are on-site right now. That is something you can filter for if you are only looking for remote opportunities. Now you'll see that this starts with all open micro internships here. If a company has ever featured a project exclusively to your school, or if you're a student athlete, an honor student, or a veteran, exclusively to one of those populations, you'll see a section above this called featured micro internships. If you ever see anything in that section, I encourage you to give it a little bit of extra consideration because it means you can see it, but not everyone using the Parker Dewey platform can, which means your chances of selection for that particular project are even better. So as you scroll through, if you see an opportunity that seems interesting, so if you're interested in content creation, you can hit the drop down and you're going to be able to see the details for that project. So you'll see a little bit about the description and when they're hoping to start. So for those who might be watching the recording later, quick heads up that we are doing this presentation on the 28th. And every once in a while, you might see something like this, where the start date is actually a few days in the past. So this is something we tend to get a lot of questions about. Is this actually still available? Is it still worth my time to apply? When companies create their project, it's automatically set so the kickoff date is a week from whenever they post, and they can adjust that, but that's when it's their intention to have made a selection. Sometimes things just get a little bit busy and they don't quite hit that date, or they just haven't gotten a candidate they're excited about yet. So if you ever see something like this with a start date in the past, we've reached out, we've said, hey, are you still planning to select someone? They've said, yes, we are. We just haven't gotten to it yet, and we want to see more applications. They have the ability on their side to pause new applications, which would make this invisible to you. The fact that you can see it means they haven't done that, which means they are open to more applicants and they haven't reviewed that. You'll also see when the company would like the project to be done and the estimated number of hours. And this is estimated because companies, or you, micro interns, don't actually have to track your time with micro internships. So if you complete this project, in 5 hours, you can do it well, that is a-okay. You will still, if you're selected for and complete this project, earn the amount shown here. Alternatively, if this is your first time doing this type of project, you're being really meticulous, asking for extra insights or perspective, as long as the company's giving you permission to share, maybe it takes you an extra 15 minutes or a half hour beyond the 7 hours. As long as you hit the deadline, nobody's frustrated, that's a-okay. And again, this is still the amount that you will earn for the project. So if you decide you are interested in that particular project, you can hit apply. And the first question is always going to be, why do you think we should select you for this opportunity? So this is a really good question to practice answering, and a question we've got resources on. So we're going to backtrack here in a second and discuss exactly how do you answer this. If there are any additional questions and what those questions are up to the company. So sometimes the company may have this be the only question because a lot of companies have found this is a really efficient and effective way for companies to quickly determine if someone would be a good fit for their project. Again, they have the ability to add others. And once you have filled this in, that is when you get the chance to submit your application. Once you've submitted, you're going to see it in the applied section. You'll always be able to know the status of your application based on which of these sections it's in. If it's inactive, that means the company is still considering your application and you may still be selected. If it's moved to past, that's how you know you are not selected for that particular opportunity, so you always know the status of your applications. So scooting back, as mentioned, why do you think we should select you is a really good question to practice, and we're going to go over some resources to help you answer it well. I'm just going to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything that I wanted to cover. And no, it looks like we've done all of this. We covered these tips for success, how to see opportunities, how to read the description, and this brings us to our short answer response resources. Now, one other thing I do want to highlight, though, is... there we go. How you can go back and forth between the dashboard and your profile. Again, you can update your profile at any time. Just go to hi, your name, go to profile. You can make any changes you want to make, and then back and forth to the dashboard. So just wanted to make sure we covered that in case you missed how I did that the first time. And with that, Here is our resources for helping you with these short answer application questions. Short answer resources is now going in the chat, and we're going to walk you through these tips kind of just one by one. So our first tip, look for the question under the question. And I know it kind of sounds like I'm a troll under a bridge with my riddles 3. It's a little cryptic, but let me explain what we mean by this. When you're answering the question, why should we select you for this project? Again, it's the same question, regardless of whether you're applying for a social media project, a coding project, a public relations project, a photography project, whatever it is. And our point here is that your answer should be different, even though it's the same question, depending on what type of project you're applying for. So when they're asking, why should we select you, make sure that you're understanding, why should we select you for the skills we're specifically looking for this opportunity, and answer accordingly. The next tip we have is to use the description to your advantage. So for some of these projects, let me scoot back here. I have way too many tabs open. Here we go. Some of them, let's see if I can find some quickly, will not list specific skills on the side. Others will. So if you're going to see them, okay, here's an example. You'll see desired skills over here. This person is specifically looking for someone who knows how to use HubSpot. Other times you'll have to read the description a little bit more carefully, and that's where they may put that information. So make sure you're looking in both of those places. And if you have a skill that they highlight in that little desired skills, or something they really put emphasis on in the description, make sure that you emphasize that skill, that experience, that ability in your response. The third tip, and perhaps in my opinion the most important, is to show instead of tell. And this is where we recommend using something called the STAR technique. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And it's just a little device to help you remember, wherever possible, to not just answer the question, but to also tell a little supporting story that answers the question. So with that, we're going to hop back into these professional communication tips that we were in earlier. And we're going to focus on the section that says when applying, because I want to give you an example of the difference between just telling versus showing. So in this example, the question, why should we select you? Again, always the first question. And let's imagine this is for a social media content calendar project. We have an example of a response. It says, you should select me because I have experience making attention-grabbing social media posts. And to be clear, that is not a bad reason to select someone for a social media content calendar project. But I want you to imagine putting yourself in the shoes of the company who's making a decision. Let's imagine a conversation between two colleagues. So I'm colleague A, I'm talking to colleague B, and I say, hey, colleague B, I need to select someone for the social media micro internship. I'm not sure who to choose. Do you have any thoughts? Colleague B, what about the one that has the experience making attention-grabbing social media posts? Colleague A, well, it's a social media project. Colleague B, that's kind of all of them. I don't know which one you're talking about. And C, alternatively, let's look at someone who used the STAR method. They had the same reason, but they told a little story. So again, you should select me because I have experience creating attention-grabbing social media posts. And then they described a situation. As the social media chair for my sorority, then they described what they were tasked with. I was in charge of the social media campaign for our recent Night in Pink fundraiser. Then they clarified the action they took. I planned a series of posts and videos across 3 different social media channels over the course of the month leading up to the event. And then the result. One of the videos I created got record engagement and contributed to increased attendance from last year's event. Now you can see this is still not an essay by any means. At the end of the day, it's only 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences. And typically 2 to 4 sentences are going to be the most effective responses, but they've told a little story by describing a situation, task, action, and result. Bonus points if they even uploaded a document to their profile that linked to the social media accounts where the folks could see that. So now let's replay that conversation between the 2 colleagues with this response in mind. Colleague A, hey, colleague B, I'm trying to choose someone for the social media micro internship that we're going to do. I'm not sure who to pick. Do you have any thoughts? Colleague B, what about the one that did the really neat videos for their Night in Pink fundraiser? Did you see them attached to their profile? Colleague A, I did, and that highlighted some really cool skills. I agree, I like them, and I know exactly who you're talking about. Let's select them. So you can see the difference, even in these hypothetical scenarios, between just telling versus showing. And again, it's not writing an essay, it's just telling a little story. So the next tip is to mirror the brand tone in your writing. So as you're reading these descriptions, if they're using very stereotypically professional language and that resonates with you and makes sense to you, match that energy. If they're writing, yo, we need someone to make a bussin' TikTok video for our company, no cap, all facts, no printer. Sorry, I know all my references are outdated, but that's the best I've got. And that makes sense to you and it resonates with you, match that energy. The next tip, again, is to keep it short. We kind of already covered this. 2 to 4 sentences is typically going to be effective. That said, where there's an opportunity, though, you do want to go a little bit beyond a yes or no. So for example, if there's a question saying, do you have experience with Canva? Do you have experience with this coding language? Do you have experience with whatever it may be? Don't just say yes or no. Say yes, and then use that STAR method. Yes, I've used this to do XYZ with whatever outcome. Or even if you don't have that skill, don't just say no. Really think, if I don't have this skill, why am I applying for this micro internship? Chances are you have some sort of transferable skill from some other experience, and you should still be authentic in your response, but you can also highlight that transferable skill. So while I haven't used Photoshop, I am familiar with using a lot of the same tools in Canva. In that case, I've used that platform to do XYZ, which transfers well to this project. So that's an example where you're still being authentic, you're answering honestly, but you're still giving them a reason to select you. So those are tips for answering those application questions. I also want to give y'all a little bit of a cheat preview about exactly what the company sees when you apply for their micro internship. And again, the companies are only going to see your profile if you have proactively raised your hand and said, I am interested in this opportunity, and you have applied. So they're able to click into your application and they'll see a combination of the information from your profile, as well as how you respond to those application questions. And you can see up here in the top, they have actions for each candidate. They could send you a message at this point, and they might ask a follow-up question, or they might ask to schedule a brief interview to make sure it's a good fit. But a lot of the time, because these projects are so on demand, they're low risk, they're low commitment for companies, they're seen as very cost effective. A lot of companies will make a selection without any further interview process. What you see on the screen is your opportunity to make an impression, and that's just 2 things: your profile and how you respond to those application questions. So that is why it is so important to make sure your profile is complete. You've taken advantage of all those sections we talked about. You've proofread it for typos. And when it comes to your application responses, that you have been thoughtful, again, complete, that you've used the STAR method when appropriate to tell a little story. Because for most of these projects, that's going to be your only opportunity to make an impression before they make a decision. So now that we've talked about how to set up your profile, how to apply for projects, I want to talk just a little bit about how to navigate other elements of the Parker Dewey platform. So from the dashboard, this is where you're going to be able to see these other sections. We've already talked about the applied section and how you can keep track of which projects you've applied for and are still being considered for, and those that maybe you weren't considered for. Pretty intuitive. Once you've been selected for a micro internship, you're going to see it pop up in this selected section. And it will stay there until it has been marked as completed by your supervisor. Once it's been completed, you'll see it pop over here. And this is also where you'll be able to review any and all feedback the company has left for you based on your micro internship performance. If a company takes advantage of that ability to send you a message, you'll see that message pop up here. Now, a reminder that we at Parker Dewey are keeping an eye on these opportunities, making sure everything is legitimate and compensated appropriately and all that good stuff. But because these projects are so on demand, there's not a delay between when companies post and when y'all are able to see it. So if a company ever posts a project, you apply, and they come back very quickly saying, oh, great, we want to select you. All I need is your social security number or your ITIN number or anything like that, or anything that they say they need to pay you. Reminder, the company are not the ones that pay you. Parker Dewey are the ones that pay you. So if anyone ever requests any of that information, you say, Parker Dewey pays me, not you. And you reach out to the Parker Dewey team and let us know. Again, This is not something that's likely to happen. Just in case a bad actor gets through, though, we want to make sure that you are equipped with all the information you need to protect yourself. All right. So you may be thinking now, okay, I know how to set up my profile. I know how to look for opportunities. I know how to apply for opportunities. What if I actually get selected? What do I do? What are my support systems? How does this all work? If you get selected for a micro internship, you are going to receive an email letting you know, and that's going to include the contact information for the professional at the company that you're doing the project for. It's also going to include accounting forms, so you can make sure you're all set to be paid once you are done. Again, you will be paid by Parker Dewey, not by the company you're working with, by Parker Dewey. Terms of use, some best practices. So basically, you're going to get a lot of resources. If you are in your micro internship and you're getting stuck as to what to do next, you do have multiple resources available to you. So your first line of defense is going to be that micro internship supervisor, the professional that has posted the company that you meet with for a kickoff meeting to make sure you have all the details. So if you're thinking, okay, I know how to get started, but I'm not sure what to do after this step, or I'm thinking about handling it this way, but I don't know, I want to make sure that's right, run it by them. Get their feedback to make sure you are meeting expectations and working on a project in a way that is going to meet their goals. Another thing you might consider doing is asking your micro internship supervisor, is anything that I'm working on confidential? And the reason why this question is important is because when you act as a Parker Dewey micro intern, you agree to something called a non-DA or non-disclosure agreement. Now, I want to be clear. You may have also heard of something called a non-compete agreement. That is something totally separate. There are no non-compete agreements for micro internships. That would make absolutely no sense since these are so short term. So it's not a non-compete agreement. It's a non-disclosure agreement. And what that means is if the company tells you anything confidential that you need to do the project, that you're not just going to blast that out to the universe. Now, most of the time, micro interns really aren't working with sensitive or confidential information, but just to be safe, it's a good idea to ask, is anything that I'm working on confidential? If the company says, no, not really, we're just looking for your perspective or to get this information, then say, hey, is it okay if I ask my faculty member, or I have a mentor that works in this industry, I kind of want to get their perspective. And a lot of times the company's going to say, yeah, that'd be great. So you can check with alumni, you can check with faculty, you can say, hey, I'm working on this project. This is what I'm thinking or how I'm going about it. Do you have any feedback? And then finally, we at Parker Dewey are a resource for you. So again, if you're having trouble getting in touch with your supervisor, if you feel like you're in over your head, if you get in the project and go, oh, this is different than I thought it was, I don't know that I actually know how to do this, or if life happens and you just no longer have time to complete the micro internship and you're not sure how to professionally articulate that to your supervisor, let us know. We are here to help you handle all those situations professionally. And a reminder again, I know I sound like a broken record, but we often have folks ask the company about the pay, and the company's like, I don't know. And that's because we, Parker Dewey, are the folks that handle the pay. Pay is processed once a month, and that gets processed at the end of each month. So for example, if your supervisor marks a project completed today, October 28th, that pay is going to get processed at the end of this month, assuming you filled out the paper, not the paper, the accounting forms, they're not on paper. And you will see that pay in your bank account, depending on how fast it is, typically within the first couple of days of the month. Alternatively, if you complete your project, let's say November 2nd, same logic applies. That pay will be processed at the end of November. You'll see it in the bank account at the beginning of December. So if you're finishing your project very early in the month, there's going to be a little bit of a gap between when you complete it and when you get that pay, just because payroll is only processed once a month. So if you have questions, you're going, hey, I finished that a while ago. Where's my money? Parker Dewey stiffed me. Check which date was marked completed. And if you have questions, reach out to us. When you get selected, in addition to some of those other resources we talked about, you're also going to get a micro internship success checklist. So when you were hearing about reaching out to that supervisor, if you're going, well, how exactly do I do that? What language do I use? How do I get a meeting set up? We have resources in this checklist to help you feel confident doing so. So you can follow these templates knowing that you're reaching out in a professional way. We have tips to help you be successful during that meeting, and even templates for an email follow-up to make sure you have a clear understanding of all the expectations. Because again, depending on the complexity of the project, these might have different answers. Going forward, you might just exchange a couple emails, or depending on how long the project is, you might want to set up weekly check-in calls to see how things are going. You might want to make sure, not might, you definitely want to make sure you have a clear understanding of the due date. The company might want you to submit the deliverable a few days before the end date listed in the project, so they have time to review that and to give you resources. I see the question, is there a link to the checklist? 100%, there is that link to the checklist. And I see a question in regards to pay. What does it mean if you're selected for multiple micro internships completed in the same month, you would be paid for both at the same end of month day? Exactly. So just to put more concrete examples to that, if you complete a micro internship on November 3rd, and then there's another one you were selected for, you completed on November 17th, the pay for both of those is going to get processed at the end of November, show up in your bank account at the beginning of December. Again, assuming that you filled out the banking forms. But if you haven't, we're going to be sending you some reminders because we want to make sure you get paid. Very similar to the success checklist you get when you are on the job, you'll also get a post-micro internship success checklist after your project has been marked as completed. This gives you resources and reminders to review your feedback, to reflect on your experience, and to add the experience to your resume and your LinkedIn. So as a reminder, whatever company you worked with, regardless of the company, you're going to be adding this as an independent contractor or consultant of Parker Dewey. And you'll also want to ask the company, is it okay if I include your name in the project description? Most of the time, the company is going to say, yeah, go for it. But every once in a while, they might have you working on something that is maybe confidential or client facing for them. They just may not want it out there. So this also encourages you and guides you on how to describe the client without naming them. So for example, instead of naming a company here, clarify it, a Chicago-based SaaS platform. Sometimes you may want to do this even if the company says, yeah, it's okay to use our name. If it's a smaller company, maybe a local mom and pop shop, again, we have a big range. You might want to describe the company instead of naming them if it's not a company that is going to have significant brand recognition. Again, most of the time the company is going to say, yeah, it's a-okay to include our name in the description, but just make sure that you ask first, again, because of that non-disclosure agreement. It's also going to give you some templates to share your experience on LinkedIn, let other folks know what you completed. It gives you templates depending on whether you're more naturally verbose or if it makes more sense to you to do a short version. We've got resources so you can see examples. We encourage you to ask your supervisor, assuming you did your best effort, for a recommendation on LinkedIn. And we've got tips to help you keep in touch with that professional because they are now part of your professional network. So coming back full circle, these are those same folks, again, that we saw at the beginning that were saying, I can't afford to do an unpaid internship. I need to make a pivot. I don't have time to do a traditional internship. I don't know what I want to do. I'm just struggling to get that first step. And you can read here about how micro internships helped them navigate those challenges and begin building that real world experience. So if you were inspired by seeing stories like this, we have plenty more micro intern testimonials that we encourage you to check out. We have all different types of majors, all different types of schools, all different types of experiences. So please feel free to check those out. I see someone asking, is the end of internship checklist with the above link? No, that one is a separate one, but here, let me put the post micro internship checklist. And again, if you are selected, sorry, I'm having trouble spelling micro internship for a second. There we go. Post micro internship success checklist is now in the chat, and you will get these things emailed to you directly if you are selected for a micro internship. You'll also be able to find them on this page right here. So if you want to review these resources before even applying, this is again the page we shared at the beginning. I'll put it in the chat here too. This allows you to get all the information we covered today. If you want to come to another event that reviews some of this, but your success checklist and post-success checklist are also here if you want to review these in advance and just feel a little bit more confident about the resources you'll receive if you're selected. So coming full circle, if you haven't already, create that account, get that out there. Make sure that profile is complete. Again, the profile and your application responses are it in terms of your opportunity to make an impression most of the time. So make sure those are in good shape. Log in regularly. As a reminder, these move quickly. If you do see something that interests you, don't sit on it. Most projects are only posted for a few days, maybe a week, usually less. I've seen some go as quickly as a few hours. So apply as soon as you see something you're interested in. And one more tip, if you are interested in opportunities within a specific industry, and maybe you're not seeing a lot in that industry, we also do a webinar once a quarter where we coach you using LinkedIn and Handshake on how to reach out to companies of interest and say, would you be interested in posting a micro internship? This is what I'd love to work on. Here's how you would post this for me. So please feel free, if that's of interest, to join us in December. We also have a Career Launchers LinkedIn page that has reminders about those types of events, that has resources, that has perspective you can read from other micro interns. So I'm going to put the link to that in the chat as well, if you would like to give us a follow. And with that, if there's time for, I think we've got some time for questions, and I want to make sure you all see this QR code. Make sure that you enter it, and Jeanette can speak more to the details about why this QR code is important.
Thank you, Danielle. Yes, and if there are any other questions, please add them to the chat. The QR code is there. As I mentioned, I am with VCU Career Services, and Danielle was kind enough to be our guest speaker today. The QR code or the web address that is there allows our office to get feedback from you as the audience to continue to improve programs and resources that we're providing. And so I'm going to drop that link in the chat, and the event number is event number 29. And so if you scan the QR code or you use that tiny URL, it'll take you to a brief survey to give you an opportunity to give us feedback on your experience with this session. Again, we want to make sure that we're continuing to offer sessions that are helpful for you because there are so many different opportunities for experiential learning. We want to make sure that we're sharing as much as we can with you.
And y'all had some great questions going through. So if there are any resources you wanted to see again or anything like that, please feel free to ask. And I think I also have these slides in PDF form. So you probably noticed as we were going through, there were lots of links within these slides that you may find helpful. So the link to those slides is now in the chat as well. So, those short answer examples and resources, those checklists, everything that was linked to in there is now linked to in the slides that you have access to in the chat as well.
Thank you, Danielle. That's really helpful. And you attended the session. I will be sending the recording to everyone that attended. And Danielle, since you included the slides, I will attach those as well. So if you didn't get a chance to grab them from the chat, or anyone that had to leave early, we can get that information to them. So any last minute questions, anyone? All right. Well, Danielle, thank you so much. It was such a helpful session. I appreciate you walking students through the whole entire process. Definitely very helpful. Like I said, I'll send a follow-up email, and the resources that Danielle was so amazing to share with us today. We are so thankful for your continued partnership, Danielle, and I hope everyone have, what is the usual time new opportunities appear is the question.
Great question. And this is unlike traditional internships where companies are usually planning like, this is going to be for the fall, this is going to be for the spring. With micro internships, companies might be in a team meeting on Monday and realize, oh, I need this done by next week, and they're posting it that day. So that's a long-winded way of saying there is no, they're always posted at this time kind of a thing. So what I would recommend, one is checking in regularly. Two is if you create a Parker Dewey account, you're going to get a monthly newsletter. Sometimes those feature, if we have a company who has posted opportunities in bulk, they might be highlighted there. And follow that LinkedIn page. If we have an opportunity that is maybe looking to select a lot of micro interns, we've had a medical device company, for example, that hired micro interns in bulk because they were trying to find folks for their sales program. And the ones that did a great job on their micro internship ended up getting job offers. If we have something like that where they're looking to hire a lot, we may post about that on that LinkedIn page as well. So there's no set time, but keep an eye on those resources, the newsletter, the LinkedIn page, and logging in regularly.
Amazing. Thank you for those tips, Danielle. I hope everybody has a great start to their week. And again, lots of events happening for Transformative Learning Week. Make sure you check it out. Have an amazing Monday. Bye.
Bye, everybody.